1,000 songs. And it goes right in my pocket.
Failure of the future has to be a nation that is agile, that is innovative, that is creative.
Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about innovation in the enterprise, brought to you and run by Collective Campus, an innovation hub based in Australia that works with companies to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies and tools to successfully explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. For more information, go to www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future Squared. Before we kick off, I just wanted to remind everybody that we have just released the Innovation Managers course, an online course that gives you the mindsets, methodologies, and tools to successfully explore disruptive innovation in your company. To check it out, head to innovationmanagerscourse.com. Today I'll be speaking with Patrick King. He's a social interaction specialist based in San Francisco and has been featured on numerous national publications such as Inc.com. He's a #1 Amazon best-selling dating and relationships author. Somewhere among the many clients throughout the years, he decided to flesh out his inner monologue and found that he had quite a bit to say. He focuses on using his unique emotional intelligence and understanding of human interaction to break down emotional barriers, instill confidence, and equip people with the tools they need for success. A number of topics, including how to get buy-in for corporate innovation projects. So with that, I bring you the one, the only Patrick King. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Hey, Steve. Hey, thanks for having me.
No worries. It's an absolute pleasure. And you're joining us all the way from sunny San Francisco.
Yes, I am. Home of the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah,
right.
Lost game 1, I understand, the other day.
Okay, let's move on. Just kidding. Yeah, we'll get them back.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, San Francisco I'm based in. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying the sign of a champion team is always the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, so I'm sure they'll do fine.
That's right.
Fantastic. So, Patrick, you've done a lot of work. Well, you've written a ton of books on dating, on persuasive relationships, on having, influential conversations and that sort of stuff. Tell us a bit about the background of Patrick King and how you came to be an author on these topics.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked. And I think this might be something that appeals more to your audience because I am one of you guys, I would say, is that I used to be a corporate lawyer. So I spent, 3 years in law school, take another year studying for the law school entrance exam, the LSAT in the U.S. And I spent another, I passed the California bar, which is the hardest in the U.S., and then I practiced for 2 years as a corporate/startup lawyer.
Right.
So it was during this time that I just kind of, there are a few realizations. One of the big ones was that, wait a second, I haven't really gotten any of my jobs through my resume, which is beneficial to me because I was not very focused in law school and my grades weren't very good. So I didn't get anything through my resume, and what I kept getting it through was these, I would just make connections with people. I would go to an event. I would come away, I would meet with people, and, I would be likable and fit, that's the ever elusive fit that people are looking for. I always fit what people's organizations were looking for. So during that point, I had met one of my ex-girlfriends through online dating. So this kind of ties into where I started doing all this stuff. I had met one of my ex-girlfriends through online dating. And then San Francisco, which is, as you may know, kind of the jumping off point for a lot of the dating apps, for all the technology and integrating technology into everything possible, including dating. So I had a lot of friends that they were interested in checking out online dating, but they weren't sold on it. This was maybe 2012, which was kind of right before everything exploded. So it was a little weird still, I guess, in a lot of people's minds.
There was a big stigma around online dating back then still.
There really was, yeah. I remember even feeling uncomfortable that I had met my girlfriend, online. I didn't tell a lot of people that.
Yeah, did you have to make up stories about where you met?
I did. I think I just said we met at a bar or something,
Yep.
And hopefully people didn't keep asking about it. Like, which bar? Oh, that sounds cute. What did you say? I'm like, anyway. Look at the weather. Anyway, so I started, I wrote about 15 profiles for my friends, or 15 friends, just because they were interested in this, but they didn't know where to start because this online dating profile with the messaging is this weird combination of like a pickup line and like a resume, right?
Yeah.
It's how do you sell yourself in a way that's flattering but not arrogant or cocky or just a total lack of self-awareness. So I did that. I started writing books on that. Eventually I started coaching online dating and dating. and then I became a matchmaker for a period of time. So all this kind of led me to realize that it's great when you can get in front of someone, which was the goal with the dating, the online dating and the matchmaking. But once you're in front of them, if you can't have a good conversation, if you can't connect, if you can't just even make eye contact, which is something that a lot of people have trouble with and that I help advise with, if you can't do these things, then I can get you on lots of dates and that's not going to matter.
Yeah.
So, it all takes a step back to the foundational skills of what I specialize in: social skills, conversation skills, charisma, that type of thing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I guess, just taking it back a notch, when you talk about creating those profiles, the 15 profiles for your friends, did you A/B test any of these profiles based on the words that were used, the imagery, etc.?
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way, because I would put a story in one profile. I would write things a certain way in another profile. They didn't know I was doing this.
Yeah,
but over time, and it didn't take a lot of time to just see what's more responsive, what works, and then by that time, I had seen thousands of profiles and written like hundreds of messages. So you just develop a sense of judgment.
It's interesting. I've actually got a friend who he's dabbled in the space of online dating, and he's put his digital marketing talents to the test, where he's created multiple profiles to attract different types of girls, which is quite interesting. Yeah, so in one he's like this buff athletic guy, and another one he just comes across like a bit of a hipster, and you just maximize a guy, I guess.
Yeah, one of them he's like all about the granola. He's all about like the crystal deodorant, no shampoo. I get it, man. Yeah,
well, hey, why not? Play the cards you dealt.
That's smart.
Cool. So on the art of persuasive leadership, let's say, that's the title of one of your books, Inspire, the Art of Persuasive Leadership. It puts forward a number of different concepts that I'd love to explore. So one thing our audience struggles with is basically influencing senior management, particularly when it comes to getting buy-in for doing things a different way, whether it's an innovation project, whether it's some idea that they want to sell further up the food chain. Usually, they put the idea forward, it gets shut down, and that's the end of it. It seems as if some of the concepts you've written about could be put to use in terms of getting that buy-in. So generally, there is a misalignment between what senior management wants, which is, quick fire, return on investment, keep shareholders happy, and what people further down the food chain want, which is perhaps more about, look, we want to create new value, we want to add something, we want to fulfill some of our own purpose and our own identity in this company. What are some strategies that somebody looking to influence senior management or someone else within an organization could basically implement to help them, chip away and get that buy-in?
I'm actually glad you phrased it that way, because you're talking about what one party wants and what the other party wants. And the easiest way is to just kind of utilize people's selfishness, as I talk about in one of the chapters. When you know what someone wants, why wouldn't you phrase it? Why wouldn't you phrase, a proposition in terms of exactly what they want and exactly all the ways that it benefits them? And that's how you're going to get your buy-in. It's not about you putting forth an idea to get buy-in so you can validate yourself and then so that your idea can help the company. It's about how, I guess the manager, supervisor, it's how they can frame it as maybe even their own. It's how they can benefit. It's all the benefits and effects that they can see as a result of what you bring to them. So that's going to be a major part of it. And that's probably, even in conversation, even in dating, even in everything, that's what people fail to utilize and take advantage of is everyone's coming to the table with these different desires, different, degrees of selfishness. I don't even mean that in a negative term, of course. It's just what people want. And we fail to see that in front of our faces time after time, especially in negotiation, especially in management. And if we take advantage of that better, then we become accustomed to getting what we want more of the time.
No, that's a great way of looking at it, and it reminds me of an infographic I saw on sales and marketing, and they use the analogy of Super Mario when he gets the little flower and he's able to then shoot fireballs. Most people, when they're trying to sell a product, they sell the flower. They don't sell the ability to shoot fireballs, which is essentially why the customer is engaging you.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Exactly. So have you got any examples? I know you've done some work with organizations in this space, and you initially started out as more of a dating writer, but you seem to be writing a lot more about organizational conversations. Have you come across examples where people have applied these strategies?
Not right at the top of my head. I do have a similar one where it's just where it was actually the boss that was kind of understanding what his subordinates employees wanted, and employees just wanted to feel validated. They wanted to feel heard. They felt like they were being treated poorly by the boss who was my client. And then it really turned out was that the boss was so type A focused. He just couldn't be bothered. He was impatient. He didn't want to waste any type of time on small talk, on getting to know their names. Yeah. I asked him once if he knew anything about, he employed about 20 people. I asked him once if he knew anything about the people, like if they had significant others, if they had children, if they had pets, and he just said no. He didn't know anything. Yeah. So one of the ways is, you utilize this selfishness is I want to feel heard. I want to feel validated. Why can't the boss, the supervisor, just ask a simple question just to fulfill that need a little bit and make them feel a little bit better, make them feel that their selfish desire has been fulfilled so they can bring more positivity to everything.
That makes sense. And you've talked about the concept of making actions converse louder than phrases. Would you care to elaborate?
Yeah, I just think it's the age-old saying, as you say, actions speak louder than words. And it's another age-old saying where it's like you're the first in and you're last out. But that's not what you should be doing. That's not what we can be doing as as the subordinate or the supervisor. Yeah. That's maybe the ideal case, but you can work strategically around that by just making sure that when you're doing something. I don't even mean this in a negative way, but you're being strategic about when you're doing something so that your actions are seen. You're creating somewhat of an illusion that you are the first one in, you are the last one out. Just do it in front of other people's faces. That's how you demonstrate commitment. When you're doing something, make sure that you're getting credit for it. That's really what it is. And that's what a lot of people fail to do. They feel that if they're in their corner, no, not the corner office, because that's a good place. If they're just in their corner of their cubicle, then they feel like if they're just doing their work, someone will eventually take notice. But that's not how it works. And you know why? Is because the office place and the world in general is not a meritocracy. It's not a meritocracy. Maybe it's a meritocracy based on what people notice and see. Even that's probably a stretch. Yeah. But the point is to make sure you're doing it in front of people's faces. Do it strategically and create this illusion about yourself.
So it's essentially, everything can be brought back to the 80-20 principle, right? So essentially what you're saying is rather than sitting in your little corner of your cubicle, as you put it, all day, 14 hours a day, it's about being there at the right time of the day to be seen, to be doing something and to start developing that sort of, I suppose, perception of self.
Yeah, I think you hit on a very good point. Whereas people that are in the cubicle grinding for 14 hours a day, they have this conception that that's going to get them where they ultimately want to be. But it isn't, and it almost never does. I'll take it back to my experience in law firms. Is lawyers kind of behind their back are categorized into two categories. So there's the grinders, which, as you can imagine, just the worker bees, just like he's a good grinder. He'll do this work for us. He'll bill a ton of hours for us. And then, conversely, on the other side, there's the rainmakers. And these are the people that bring in clients. They're social. They don't bill nearly as many hours, but I'll tell you what, they get paid a lot more. They move up much faster, and they're much more respected just because of their ability to really just connect with people. So you have these two dichotomies, and which one? I don't know. You tell me which one works better.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's a great point. I think it applies internally within organizations, but it's also the same with sales. Obviously the quality of the product you're selling, the service you're providing, comes into the equation, but a big part of it is the relationship you have with your customer. Minus the relationship, you could have the best product in the world, but if you're, as one of my good friends like to say, a piece of shit for a human being, I don't want to do business with you. Ultimately, people want to feel like your friend in order to buy from you.
That's and that's one of the emphases of my coaching, where it's, we're all very goal-oriented at some point, be it in the workplace or through just a simple conversation or through like a networking event. We're very goal-oriented. We'll go to an event, we'll be like, oh, I'm going to get 10 business cards. I'm going to get like 4 coffee meetings out of this. And then I'm going to sell to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of things like basically through the funnel as you're approaching someone, that creates a lot of pressure. It creates a lot of weird expectations. And you just come off like a weird person because you have this in your head. You're maybe kind of aggressive. You're playing not to lose as opposed to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you become this weird vanilla version of yourself. It's very interesting to watch play out in person. You should see it. I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
But, you know, as opposed to that goal, what I always say is you should change the goal orientation to have a good interaction, have a good conversation, be entertaining for both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Feel good after the conversation, because when you hit that goal, when you connect, everything else flows naturally, you know, everything else, the money, the revenue, the sale, everything flows from that.
So on good conversations, Patrick, what are some of the key sort of tips you could give our audience when it comes to developing better relationships with people that perhaps you just met?
Perhaps you just met. Yeah, that's that's what we all do, right? I think one of my favorite ones is going to be basically how you're going to destroy small talk forever, which is going to be great for most of us.
Hate small talk.
Right? It's just, you know, so what small talk is to most of us is it's just like this superficial, like digging of, you know, you're like mining for like commonalities through these weird shallow questions like, how was your weekend? How are you? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school?
Yep.
What's a couple more? Where do you work? Where do you live? How long have you been here? Blah blah blah. And then let's say you went to the same university, right? By some miracle, and then you say, "Oh, wow, we went to the same university." And then the next natural thing you ask, "Do you know this person?"
Oh yeah, out of like 20,000 people that went to that university that year.
Right. Against all odds. Do you know this person somehow? Right.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're searching for commonality, and we're searching for something interesting to talk about, and we're just kind of doing it in the wrong way. But the fact that we're kind of doing it means that we instinctively know our overall goals. So anyway, the thing that I like to talk about, and one of the first things I always bring up with the client is, do you know your stories? So when you have a conversation like that, you know, all the questions that I just listed, how are you? Where are you from? How long have you been here? Where did you go to school? Blah, blah, blah. You know you're going to be asked them, so why don't you put a little thought and then construct a 10 to 15 second mini story about them. So, you know, you share something personal about yourself, and then you can actually take the conversation in that direction instead of, you know, poking around and just exchanging, how about you? How about you? How about you?
Yeah, definitely. And stories are quite powerful. Whether it's selling yourself or selling a product, people love to listen to a story that's engaging. So on telling a story, have you got any tips for our audience when it comes to, say, what do you do? What's your story? When someone asks you, what do you do, Patrick, what do you say?
It depends on who was asking. I actually try to downplay what I do most of the time because it's not something I want to talk about all the time. And inevitably, it kind of turns into a center of attention, as you might expect. So I'm a terrible example of this. But, you know, when I was a lawyer, I would say I do homework for a living because that's exactly what you do.
Yep.
So I'm glad you brought that up, too. You know, another way to inject some interesting moments into a conversation and just have a personal connection is to have an interesting answer for, you know, the common question. So what do you do? You know, I do this for a living. I do homework for a living, and then that takes the conversation in an interesting direction. The thing with most small talk is, look, I just met you. I don't care. I don't care where you're from. I don't care how long you've been here.
Yeah.
All I want you to tell me is something interesting. Can you just do that?
Exactly.
So, and then, you know, a lot of people just fail to recognize that. So make everyone's job more easier and just tell people something interesting.
That's it. It's interesting. It reminds me of Neil Strauss in The Game. He talks about how when girls would ask him what he does for a living, he'd say something like professional mustache comber. And it would just build mystique, and it would be a funny thing to say, and then it would take the conversation off in a tangent rather than just being all serious all the time.
Yeah, that's what I find. That's what I found like just infuriating about these networking events. Where you're meeting people, and you know, also what happens most of the time in a workplace, like your audience is, it's just everyone tries to be so vanilla and appropriate all the time, and everyone's thinking the same thing. So I don't know why we're not just saying it out loud, like something like, "Oh, are we really just being this polite as a facade all the time?
Yeah.
So, yeah, right? So go ahead.
No, and it's interesting. I mean, there's typical questions like, how was the weekend or whatever. It's, for me, it's asking questions that are more outcome driven. Like, what was the craziest thing about your last job, or what most scares you about, X or Y? And actually, that tends to elicit more interesting responses than just what do you do. It goes back to that whole Super Mario example. Right? It's not about the flower; it's about the fireball. What drives you? Why do you go to work? What is the mission and all that sort of stuff of your company or whatever it is? It's just a little bit more interesting than just what do I do? Well, this is what I do. Okay, end of conversation.
No, not end of conversation until you say, "How about you?"
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Right. So let me actually expand on that a tiny bit before we move on. I think it's interesting that you brought that up because that is actually not a question I would recommend most people use, like the lines of questioning that you have sometimes that you're talking about. And just the simple reason is that's like a very hard question for most people to answer. Because so then what that causes, what you'll get is you'll get a silence. You'll get someone saying, well, it's a good question. Let me think about that. And then that stops it dead halt. So I would say a better way to do that is to ask the broad question and then say, what was the question? What was the worst thing about your job, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. What was the scary? What's the most question I always ask is, what's the scariest thing you did lately? What's the last scariest thing you did, right? And it could be anything. I had to give a presentation to 500 people. What was that like? Well, it wasn't so bad, et cetera, et cetera. That way they naturally start telling a story about something. So
very true. Ask for stories, not answers.
Exactly.
Yep.
Cool. So wanted to dive a little bit deeper into a topic you've talked about in your book, which is how to subconsciously place yourself as an authority. And, this is obviously quite important for our audience, many of which maybe, as I alluded to earlier, battling some of the forces a bit higher up the food chain, but perhaps don't have any authority in the organization, but still want to have some kind of influence. So how does one go about subconsciously placing themselves as an authority?
I think it starts with looking at how someone is placing themselves right now. And if they're in the mindset that they feel that they need to increase their influence, they're probably portraying themselves as someone that is, maybe just in, as we talked about, the grinder.
Yeah.
They're not portraying themselves as someone with authority. So a large part of it, this might be like a disappointing answer. A large part of it just comes to how you portray yourself in front of other people. Do you speak so other people will listen? Are you presenting yourself as an authority, subconsciously and consciously with your body language, with your vocal tonality, even with just, the way you say things. So, you can say something like, can I have a meeting with you? Or you can say something that's like, Tuesday or Thursday? Which day is better for you for meeting, right?
Yeah, it's that whole you are who you think people think you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I think classic example, Steven Tyler, Aerosmith, read his biography many years ago, but in their early days, back in the early to mid 70s, he had this whole thing where he even acted like he was a rock star. Even though he was playing little bars in front of 17 people for 2 or 3 years, there was this whole self-belief of acting like you're a rock star. Otherwise, you don't portray yourself as such. People don't buy into the idea as much, and then that just flows on from there. Whereas if people start to perceive you as having this sense of authority because you're walking around with, I suppose, broad shoulders, and the way, your language is very dominant, like you said, Tuesday or Thursday, it's not, can I have a meeting with you? Eventually people start buying into that.
Yeah. Great that you use the word perceive, because I think the people that are struggling with this are convinced that, number one, it's a meritocracy, and number two, that they're always lacking in one or two aspects of what it takes to be an authority. So one of the questions I'd like to ask is, look, if you read the top 3 books on this particular topic that you're questioning, if you're an authority, if you're an expert, if you're good at, if you're above average at, would you learn anything? The vast majority of the time, people are not going to learn anything. They reply with the resounding, no, I wouldn't learn anything. Those are basic books. But these are the top 3 books in the category. So, okay, maybe you do know a little more than you think you do. You just need to own that and then take it's a perception. So perceive yourself to be, and then other people will as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Carol Dweck captured that perfectly in the book Mindset. Your growth mindset versus your fixed mindset. So makes perfect sense. Ties in well with that. So I wanted to just touch on some of the dating stuff. I mean, no doubt some of our listeners are single. If you could give them just one dating tip, Patrick, what would it be?
Ooh, okay. 2 questions. Is this for male or female? And is it online or in person?
Ooh, we're going to go with in person, and let's go with male.
Okay. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. It doesn't matter what you say when you approach a girl. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Because when you try to think that it matters, then you're getting into the goal orientation again. And then you really psych yourself out. Yeah. Because you think, when you think that the goal is like, okay, I'm going to talk to her, I'm going to touch her here, I'm going to get her phone number, and then we're going to have sex. When you think through that chain, that funnel, that really messes with your head. Yeah. So as I said, just the overall goal is just to start a conversation. It's just to get a response. It's just to get a smile. Mm-hmm. So as far as icebreakers go, there are indirect and there are direct ones. Mm-hmm. So the direct ones, you already know. It's hi, how are you? Or hi, I'm Patrick. Or hi, I'm Steve. Yeah. Fine. But, most people have problems with that. That's why I will almost always recommend indirect ones. Mm-hmm. So a few of the indirect ones are, for example, just thinking out loud, basically, and commenting on an observation, or asking a question about an observation. Mm-hmm. Did you see that moose head on the wall? Did you see that doorway? Did you see this? Did you see that? Or what do you think about that? Things like that. Mm-hmm. That's, because all you're doing is starting a conversation. So don't put the pressure on anything else. You don't need a line. You don't need them to be you don't need this perfect line where they're going to be attracted to you, charmed, laugh at you, and, sexually want you all in the same line, because that's not going to happen. You just need to start a conversation.
That's exactly right. And I think oftentimes it's a matter of not so much what you say, but how you say it, projecting that confidence.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So I wanted to close out with a few questions that I ask all of my guests. A bit of fun, Patrick. So the first one is, if you could work for any company at any stage of their life cycle, be they a startup stage or a big S&P 500 part of their life cycle, who would it be and why?
I think a good answer would be Richard Branson's Virgin, because you'd be working with him. And I think he innovated the hell out of everything he did. Yeah. He was open, and he's living the lifestyle that most people would consider amazing.
100%. And would that be when Virgin was just a little startup record store in the UK, or today, when he's got Necker Island and everything else?
When he's got Necker Island and is being photographed with naked women while jet skiing, that's pretty good too.
That's pretty good. Yep, yeah. Cool. Question number 2 is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
Let me come back to that. I promise I'll have an answer for that at the end.
All right. Well, you got a couple of minutes to think of that one while I ask you the next question, which is, how do you stay on top of your game? Do you have any rituals or routines that you take part in on a daily basis? Or?
I don't meditate, and I've heard just
everyone's talking about it, right?
Everyone's talking about it. It just doesn't. I think there's a lot of conventional wisdom that people will say works for everyone that doesn't, and I think that's one of those things that doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. How do I stay on top of everything? Well, I used to be a personal trainer, so having my gym break right smack in the middle of my day and tuning everything out and just kind of blanking my mind for a while kind of keeps me sane. So that's a good one for me.
Cool. Yeah, it doesn't work for me, man. Like I love my gym in the morning. Yeah. I'm more of a 6 a.m. guy. The few times I've tried gymming at lunchtime, I get back to my desk or wherever I'm working for the day, and I'm just like this red, lobster looking thing. People come up to me like, man, are you okay? You okay? But kudos on the lunchtime. I'd love to do lunchtime, but like meditation for you, doesn't work for me.
Yeah, fair.
All right. So, back to number 2. You're not getting off that lightly. So who would you ask, dead or alive, and what would it be?
Oh, God. So much pressure. Okay. That is a good one. I don't often think about this that much. Oh God, who would you do? Who would you ask?
Oh, wow. They turned the tables. Yeah, it is a tough question, right? I guess I'd probably go back to, the early 20th century and ask Henry Ford what drove him, and, in the face of, I suppose, a ecosystem or a commercial reality where everyone was riding around horse-drawn carriages, and he must have had this just crazy self-belief in the ability to just develop a different way of transport, and he eventually commercialized the assembly line and was able to go from building 3 cars a day to like hundreds of cars a day, and just getting inside that mind, I think, would have been fascinating.
That's a good answer. Okay, I got my answer.
Awesome.
All right, so who I would ask a question of is I'm not sure if you're familiar with Stoicism. It's this you are.
Seneca.
Exactly, Seneca or Marcus Aurelius. I would go back in time, and I think that's about, I don't even know. I think it's 100 BC.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Something around there. I would just ask, tell me about this with a question mark. Tell me about why you see it this way, because that's something I've identified with very strongly for a while, and I'm much more interested about hearing about the origins of that and how they formulated that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Have you got a favorite letter from Seneca?
It's whichever one that says the obstacle, something about the obstacle, turning that upside down. I don't remember which one.
Yeah. I think Marcus Aurelius says something similar, where every challenge is an opportunity for you to grow, essentially, and see how quickly you can bring yourself back from adversity or hardship. So, yeah.
You know what I really like about it too is that it's funny that it seems cliche now, but those are the things that the cliches were built upon. You know what I mean? So they're not. I still think that the ideas are very fresh and relevant.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, where can people go to find out a little bit more about you, your books, all the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, you can actually just find me mainly at my website, patrickkingconsulting.com, or if you're so inclined, you can look up my books on Amazon from wherever you're in.
Fantastic.
What country you're in, I mean. Yeah.
Yep, perfect. Cool. Well, thanks so much for your time, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well.
Cheers. Well, that's it for our somewhat unconventional podcast with Patrick King. We touched on a number of topics pertaining to influence in the enterprise as well as online dating. So I had a lot of fun chatting to Patrick. So as indicated, you can find out more about Patrick at Patrick King Consulting. If you're enjoying our podcast, you're picking up what we're putting down, please feel free to share, like, or subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you'd like to find out a bit more about Collective Campus, the innovation consultancy that brings you this podcast, head to collectivecamp.us. And we have also just recently released, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, our Innovation Managers online course. And you can find out a little bit more about that at innovationmanagerscourse.com. Until next time, Future Squared out.